Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. The NASCAR Championship weekend is over. Joey Logano is a three-time champion. Kyle Busch winning streak came to an end, and so much more to talk about from this race weekend. I'm Joe Samaniego, and with me we have Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com, Vince Schneider from Grid Encore. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Con the Shell, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Link in the video description. Also, buy me a coffee, YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air if we don't see you by chance on the air, or you comment when we're not live on the air. We'll thank you the next time we go live on the air, which will be Encore or Grid tonight later this week. And gentlemen, let's just get right into it. 312 laps was the scheduled distance, and it came down to the last lap, a battle between teammates. But Joey Logano is your 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion, and he had to go out, win this race, beating teammate Ryan Blaney, who was catching up after he got around Kyle Larson and William Byron. He cut down the deficit, but just the dirty air could not get around Joey Logano. Joey Logano now joins some elite company as three-time champions. Lee Petty, David Pearson, Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, and Tony Stewart, all three-time champions. But this year, though, when you look at Joey Logano's stats, 4 wins, 7 top 5s, 13 top 10s, 3 poles, and an average finish of 17.1. Matthew, how would you rate the championship compared to his first 2 championships?
It was probably the worst of the 3 statistically. I mean, to win a NASCAR Cup Series championship is incredibly difficult nonetheless. But for him to have such, I think 2018 was his best without a doubt. 2022, I think he did a great job too. And obviously in 2024, he did well when he needed to. I mean, statistically, he might be in this playoff system the worst champion. Like I said, statistically, it all depends. I want to emphasize that one for everyone. Statistically, the worst champion they've had since this playoff system has been enacted. But I mean, 4 wins, 7 top 5s. I believe 6 he had 3 top 5s in the playoffs. They all happened to be wins. So it's kind of like if he was up there, he was winning. But if he wasn't, then it was kind of like, just Joey Logano riding around. But I mean, got to give him props. So I mean, to win 1 Cup Series championship is great. To win 2 is pretty awesome. And to win 3, joining an exclusive list of just 9 other drivers before him. I mean, I tip my cap to him right there. I mean, I give him a lot. But like I just said, I think this is definitely his worst championship. But, I mean, I look forward to 2026 to see what he can do there.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no arguing it. Not only the worst of his 3, but I think statistically speaking, like you said, Matthew, the worst average finish for a Cup Series champion in the 76-year history of this sport. And I get it. I understand. And I watched the pre-race show yesterday. Jackson Todd and I were going back and forth in the chat, and he knew right away, we have very different opinions of this system. I totally respect his opinion, understand where he's coming from. And I want to make it very clear. Congratulations to Joey Logano for exposing the system. Congratulations to him for getting hot at the right time and doing everything he needed to do with the system that is the same for all 40 drivers out there on the track. You're not going to hear me call him an illegitimate champion, because there is a lot of that going on the former Bird app right now and all over social media. You're not going to hear that from me. Well done, Joey Logano. It's the system that anybody that watches this network knows that I have a massive problem with. Obviously, I don't think we're going to change it back to a regular season or full season championship, but if you wanted to make those comparisons, and again, everybody's saying that this is a waste of time, Racing Reference still tracks this stuff. So I'm just going off of what Racing Reference themselves are saying here. In 2018, Logano wins his first title. It's the year it was the big 3 and me. Everyone was so focused on Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr. In complete fairness to Joey Logano, he was 4th. He would have been next in line anyway, tallying up all the points, non-playoff standings-wise in 2018. In 2022, he was 3rd. In 2024 here, he's 12th. I saw the Winston Cup Ladford System points account on X.com was saying that he would have jumped up to 11th. He would have been 13th entering this race. 13th, 14th, wherever he was before he went on this run here in these last couple of races, that doesn't even qualify you for the original chase from 2004 to 2013. I don't think really under any format, unless maybe you had a bunch of wins from 2011 to 13 and you were between 11th and 20th in the standings. Maybe you could get a wild card in there. But regardless, this is the only system where you could have a season like Joey Logano had with so few top fives, so few laps led, a statistically mediocre average finish, if we're really being honest. I mean, 17th place, you're really halfway down the result sheet if that's what your average finish is. And only because we had an insane race at Nashville, thanks in no small part, I saw this come up on social media as well. Austin Cindric spinning out, really sparking the quintuple overtime we got of a Nashville race. But that locks Joey Logano in, and then he gets lucky with the disqualification of Alex Bowman. He's the next one in line. He gets back into a round of 8. All he has to do is win one race in the round of 8. He's in the championship 4, and all he had to do today was win the race. Now, again, I say all he had to do. He had to still win multiple races, go get the job done when it mattered most, and he did that. Congratulations to him. But over the course of a full season, what is the point of crowning a champion in sports? It's to say who was the best team or the best driver over the course of this season. That's how we look back on championship years. This is, statistically speaking, easily the weakest season for a NASCAR Cup Series champion, regardless of what format you want to throw in there to make a comparison.
This format, one of those deals where he got on the right wins at the right times to put himself in this spot. And I got to say, it's just really interesting to see Joey Logano, considering this was the year where Ford came out really slow. He got a couple of wins. I was just never thinking, okay, he's going to make a deep playoff run. If anything, I think myself and other people were curious, can he keep his even year streak going? He got that opportunity after Alex Bowman got disqualified. He made the most of it, and this is just so similar to the last time he won a championship. He won that first race in the round of 8. It seemed like the next 2 races, he's not really mentioned about. We know that team is just working on the 22 car for Phoenix. And once again, fast car at Phoenix, hard to beat when he was in clean air. He had a little bit of a slow stop where he was a little bit in the top 10, but he still got his way towards the front. Ryan Blaney, he was trying everything he can to close in. He was making it look interesting at the end. Not a whole lot of action. I think that, again, the debate about Phoenix being the best racetrack or not for this race, I think that's really gained a lot more attention after this weekend. But for Roger Penske, he might like Phoenix. 3 championships in a row for Penske drivers and a 1-2 finish this year. Ben, do you believe this is a Penske dynasty in NASCAR?
Well, on paper, sure. But Joe, I know we were talking as we were backstage right as the show was about to begin. You win 3 straight championships in sports. I don't think very many people are arguing that it's not a dynasty. The Kansas City Chiefs, unfortunately for me as an Eagles fan, kind of sparking this potential three-peat that they're about to go on here. But they have a shot at that. I think everybody considers them the current NFL dynasty. The Warriors didn't even three-peat, but they went to 5 finals in a row. Very, very few people are going to be arguing against them being a dynasty for the prime of Steph Curry's career and everything. Obviously, you can throw any sports comparison out there that you want in baseball or hockey or wherever as well. In motorsports, I suppose you could say Dario Franchitti had a dynasty of a turn of a decade with Ganassi winning 3 straight. In IndyCar, maybe Alex Palou is on a dynasty now with 3 out of 4 with Ganassi again here. Jimmy Johnson, obviously, if you want a NASCAR comparison, went on a dynasty run, winning 5 in a row. I don't think we'll ever see that again with a team probably even, let alone one single driver with this format here, although Penske's 3/5 of the way there. And yet, I did not think of this, Joe, as a dynasty until I looked ahead in the script tonight and saw you were going to ask us this question. I mean, it's just, I don't know if it's just apathy from a system on my part that I don't particularly care for. I don't know if it's the fact that these championships, and Ryan Blaney, I think as well, last year, probably would have been higher up in the standings than Logano, but even his average finish, I think, was among the weaker. I don't know if it was the all-time worst. If it's now the second worst, I'd have to go back and look at the list off. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know it was down there. And looking at Joey Logano's this year, obviously, they won their championships by getting hot at the right time. And again, more power to them. But when I think of full season performance, I don't know. I haven't thought about Team Penske the last few years, as impressive as they've been at Phoenix winning these championships, and thought, man, right now it's Penske and then it's everybody else, right? The Hendrick teams really have some work to do to catch up. The Joe Gibbs cars or whatever, RFK, Stuart Haas, RCR, whoever. I mean, everybody's just so far back. It's Penske in a class of their own. I haven't felt that way about this team here in the 2020s, even with these 3 championships in a row now. So again, if you're going to die on the hill that this system is incredible and it forces people to be competitive and win the right races at the right time, then I'm sure, yeah, you're going to consider this to be a dynasty. And in many ways, yeah, I suppose it is a dynasty. But for me personally, I hadn't thought about it that way until I saw this question. So it's just interesting, again, that different dynamic of it. And I guess it all comes down to how you feel about the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's hard to say it's not a dynasty. I didn't think about it, but it's pretty impressive that the 2 worst regular season, I guess, all-time like championship drivers from a full regular season standpoint in the past 2 years. If you look at it statistically, like Ben made the emphasis to let people know we're talking statistically speaking, you just get hot at the right time. Ryan Blaney was probably the worst until 2024 when his Team Penske teammate Joey Logano comes in and gets hot at the right time and wins. So it is pretty cool, though. I mean, let's give our props here to Roger Penske. I know he had incredible this year, but in general, now this was his 5th drivers' championship, 5th owners' championship. He has 1 with Keselowski, 3 with Logano, and now 1 with Ryan Blaney as well. That ties Joe Gibbs for 5th all time with 5 championships. So I think that's pretty interesting for him. But yeah, I guess, is it the start of a dynasty? I don't know. It's weird because I think we can't really group motorsport into it like we're trying to do with these playoff systems. I've never looked at motorsport and really thought to myself, yeah, I want this to just break down into a bracket and then it's a winner take all last race. No, that's good for every professional sport out there. Everyone's accustomed to that. But with motorsports, specifically NASCAR, it's just not it. It really isn't. So congrats to Joey Logano for his championship and Roger Penske for yet another impressive season. But I have not, like Ben was saying, thought to myself, if you told me for the last probably 5, 6, 7 years, who's the best team in NASCAR, Penske would not come to mind. At least they'd be 3rd maybe every single year. It's always Hendrick. It's always Gibbs. But it's crazy. We never really thought, is there going to be a dynasty coming about out of this? But now, I mean, winning 3 championships in a row in this new car, in this system that's been around for 10 years, I give them props. That's all I can really, that's what I'll finish with. I can give them props for that. Good for them.
That's another good point, though, Matthew. The next-gen car came in 3 years ago. They are still 3 years in, the only team to win Cup Series championships in the next-gen era.
That's just an amazing feat. The only team to do that. 2 different drivers. I know some folks were thinking, oh, it would have been somewhat amusing to see if the 22, the 12, and this year the 2 could have gotten it done. But that wasn't the case. The 2 did make the playoffs, but just did not have what Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney had. A little bit of luck to keep advancing in. Overall, it's just amazing because I feel with this format, it's hard to say somebody has some sort of dynasty because this isn't other sports where you're just hard to beat every week. Gee whiz, Kyle Larson had the most wins this season. Not in the championship just because he did not win the key races in the playoffs. Joey Logano did. It just seems like they just somehow elevate themselves when they need to the most to get the wins at the right time. I know something I mentioned yesterday too, that Charlotte Roval, all the people thinking had Logano not gotten in because of Bowman's disqualification, would we be talking about a Ryan Blaney championship instead? It's just really interesting how every single race, it just seems the outcome is just, there's a lot more emphasis, especially in the playoffs. For the playoffs, William Byron had a really good run. Today, just like last year, he just did not have a good car. The big thing that helped him, a late caution. Everyone pitted. He stayed out for a while, then came in, had much fresher tires. Then that caution came out, restarted with the lead, and his teammates behind him. But with no pace, the 12, the 22, they both got around. He was really got nothing for them. He came home third out of the championship 4. Tyler Reddick, he was all over the place, it seemed at times. He came home 6th place, 4th out of the championship 4 drivers. They as well did not seem to have the pace, maybe did not have the handling. Pit stop wise, we didn't see any big issues from any of the contenders. So overall, it just seemed the lack of pace for the 24 and the 45 really hurt them. Did that surprise you, Matt, that they didn't seem to have anything for the Penske Fords?
Yeah, especially Reddick. Like if you told me, I remember we did our NASCAR predictions, and I said with you and Joe, and I believe it was Jonathan, going to Phoenix, especially for the championship. I said Toyota was irrelevant at Phoenix, let's be honest, in the next gen era. And then they came out, and I think they led like 96 or something percent of the laps. Christopher Bell, absolute dominant performance. And I thought to myself, like thinking to who I was going to pick, I picked Tyler Reddick to win. Because I thought, man, if Toyota has even an ounce of what they had last time out at Phoenix, Reddick's going to just pull away with this. They did not. They had, I don't know what was going on with Reddick. I don't know if they sandbagged so bad at Martinsville that they just couldn't make it up. But this was probably one of the first times we have ever seen the championship 4 in this, so since 2014. I don't believe Reddick ever made it up to 4th when they were 1, 2, 3, 4. Like for most of this race, it felt like Logano, Blaney, Byron were 1, 2, 3, and Reddick was just somewhere else, and it was not in 4th. So I don't know what happened to the pace for them. I just don't know. I mean, Reddick's had one of the best seasons. He had the best season of his career, and was the regular season champion, obviously. But it's like when these teams, like William Byron as well, it seems like when they needed to show up the most, they kind of just didn't this time around. And that's the unfortunate thing about a playoff system like this is you could do, like theoretically, you could win 35 races, but if you don't do well in the final race and one of these other 3 guys happens to be in front of you, you're not a champion. So obviously that will never happen. But yeah, I was very surprised, yes, for the lack of the pace, especially since Toyota, like if this was another track, I probably would have, maybe not as bad, but because of what Toyota did at Phoenix last time around, this was shocking that Tyler Reddick, I don't think he ever led either. I think Christopher Bell was the only Toyota that was really up front at all. And he would have been like, if he made the championship 4, that would have been kind of better for him. But, that situation from last week will live on for the rest of the history of the sport. But yeah, to answer that question, I was very surprised at the lack of pace, mainly by Tyler Reddick. William Byron, I think, had a decent day, but he's slowly moving up. Was 4th, I think, last time, 3rd this year. Hey, he could get 2nd or 1st next year. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think the only way there could have been more frustration on social media is if Christopher Bell had won the race and William Byron had finished 2nd and won the championship. Then I think we would have just absolutely broken NASCAR Twitter. Matthew, I'm glad you brought that up too. I'm going to talk more about that on the Encore show tomorrow, because we will, like you said, we'll never see somebody win every race except the last one and then they're not the champion. Of course, there's too much parity in the sport, but Christian Eckes came about as close as you can to doing that in the Truck Series. He had an average finish in the 5s, and I don't think I realized just how strong of a consistent run he was on. Forget the Martinsville debacle, what happened there with Taylor Gray and that controversy and everything. Consistency wise, there is no reason he should not have been the champion this year in a full season format. And obviously Ty Majeski is the one that we're celebrating instead. But again, we'll save most of that for Encore here tomorrow. In terms of, Tyler Reddick today in particular, Matthew, like you mentioned, certainly expected him to be a little bit more of a threat here. I know some people are saying maybe the behind the scenes news with the lawsuit going on with the charter situation and everything. Of course, we got a further update on that this weekend as well. Maybe that was going to be a distraction. Certainly didn't seem to be a distraction for Tyler Reddick in the round of 8. Obviously, the move that he made at Homestead to get into the championship 4 was simply incredible. So I don't know if it was that. I don't know if again, it's a manufacturer sort of thing. But to your point, Matthew, as well, we had Christopher Bell leading some laps today in a Joe Gibbs Toyota. So I don't think it was necessarily that either. I think just for whatever reason, like I said, in the next gen era with this format, Team Penske has taken full advantage of it, and more power to them. They are 3-time defending NASCAR Cup Series champions now. And I think, obviously we saw Ross Chastain spoil the party for everybody in terms of winning the race last year. But I think Chevy and Toyota both are going to have to go back to the drawing board with their strong teams here and try to figure out, whoever they have in the championship for next year, what can we do to take the fight to Penske, assuming Penske does put probably Blaney or Logano more likely than Cindric. But then again, Joe, like you mentioned, Cindric, probably had the best season of his young career this year as well and won a race, got into the playoffs, didn't get very far, but you just never know. They're going to have to look at what Penske has done and try to figure out what they can do in 2025 to match that pace when it comes time for a championship fight again next year.
That's amazing because we heard how they was talking about after last year in Phoenix, the 2014 is like, okay, we're going to start working on Phoenix. We know this is going to be the championship race a year in advance. Pretty much you could work on winning the Daytona 500 like William Byron did. Just focus on Phoenix car. But it just seems whatever the Team Penske folks know about Phoenix, they just seem to have it dialed in. In the chat room, Nicholas, Joey Logano doesn't deserve a three-time champion who would have been 14th in the regular season points format. Byron should be your 2024 champion. NASCAR needs to get rid of this system. This system is just making it where we are knowing there's people discussing, debating Joey Logano being a champion. At the end of the day, I always refer to what Steve said at the State of the Sport. All the teams knew the rules. It's just the way the format works out. But when you look at the results, especially drivers that got more wins, Kyle Larson, they didn't get into championship 4. As Nicholas say, playoff format because it doesn't crown a real champion, but NASCAR doesn't even care at all.
Well, Joe, I don't know. I don't know, but we need to be showing Nicholas's comment. I think that's just a bot. It's probably just some spam appearing in there. So if that account keeps coming up here, I think that's probably just a bot's opinion. That's not a real person because from what I was told, anybody that has opinions like that, they're just a bot on Twitter. So I don't know.
Like Brock Beard, Brock Beard, and those other bots last week. That really, definitely, Nicholas. I think you understand we're messing around, but definitely encourage everyone.
That's a joke, and that's a reference if you listen to Action Detrimental this week for anybody that doesn't get that joke.
Yeah, the one thing I always felt with this format, it almost seems to be like they want sort of that unpredictability where somebody could have a Cinderella run in the playoffs, and I get that in college sports, professional sports, everyone loves a good underdog, but when it's like you're still racing against Kyle Larson. It's not he gets eliminated and he's not on the racetrack no more. No, everyone's still there. He can still go out and win races. It's just mind-blowing to me. That said, one thing I think is a bit mind-blowing for a lot of folks, the 19-year run of Kyle Busch winning at least one race a season has ended. Kyle Busch spent most of the day outside the top 25, was not a contender at all for the win. Richard Childress Racing, they only got one win from Austin Dillon at Richmond. And of course, that's the infamous finish involving Joey Logano. That could have been another win for Logano. But Dillon got removed from the playoffs after that win. And then this year, unfortunately, I think Kyle Busch is mostly going to be remembered for his fight with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at North Wilkesboro. Ben, do you believe this is more because RCR needs the equipment to be better contending for wins? Or is Kyle Busch not exactly the driver he used to be competitively?
I don't think it's that. I think, Kyle Busch is 39 years old. I think, statistically speaking, a lot of drivers actually just hit their prime, which is kind of crazy to think about Kyle Busch and all the success that he's had, 60 plus cup wins and obviously a couple of championships of his own. But I think Kyle's got just as much competitive fire as ever. And I think he's just as good a driver as ever. I really don't think, you're seeing it now with Denny Hamlin, even well into his early to mid 40s. Kevin Harvick, another great example of drivers staying competitive into their early 40s. I don't think this is like, we've historically seen in Formula One, you get into your late 30s, early 40s, that's considered ancient. That's probably like, Mark Martin, racing into his 50s here in NASCAR Cup. That's what we see over in Formula One. Here in NASCAR, though, it's easy to stay competitive, I think, in your late 30s and early 40s, for the drivers that have all the experience and are at the top of their game here, multiple-time champions. In the case of Kyle Busch, I think he still has what it takes to be competitive. It's RCR that I question here, can they give him the equipment necessary to do so? And you saw it this year with Austin Dillon as well. And I don't think Austin Dillon's nearly as great of a Cup Series driver as Kyle Busch is. And I know he did get that win at Richmond under very controversial circumstances, and which again is another tragedy of modern day NASCAR and all the gimmicks and everything with overtime. He was well on his way to winning that race regardless. So give credit where it's due there. And Kyle Busch, maybe could have had a couple here or there. Things gone slightly differently. He came this close at Atlanta, finished third. I think a lot of people forget just how close he was to winning a race just in the second race of the season. So who knows how that might have sparked a different kind of season run for him if he had, had just another hundredth of a second to his advantage there. But I think, when you look at any format you have here, pulling up again the Latford System Winston Cup account, Kyle Busch would have been 17th this year. In non-playoff standings, I think he would have been 17th under the current point system. And then under the actual system where he ranks in the final official points, he's 20th, which is, I think, again, is because a lot of drivers, leapfrogged him from getting into the playoffs. And you had drivers ahead of him like Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, and Chris Buescher that, might have been in the top 16 points wise, but obviously didn't win a race in the first 26 races, so they didn't get into the playoffs to begin with. So regardless of how you slice it, not the season that Kyle Busch would have wanted, to say the least, but I think that's more a reflection on RCR and how much work they have to do to get back to the level that they want to be at, rather than an indictment on Kyle Busch's talent or saying that he's washed or he needs to retire or whatever. I don't think anything could be further from the truth. I expect Kyle Busch to take this offseason, be more fired up than ever. And I would not bet against him winning multiple races next year if RCR can do their part to give him the car, but he needs to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ben there. I think it's RCR. It's not Kyle Busch here at all. I mean, when you put one of arguably the greatest driver in the history of your sport, similar to Formula One with Sir Lewis Hamilton, remember, some of the best equipment, but he was winning all the time. And then all of a sudden, like Kyle Busch's streak came to an end, Lewis Hamilton's came to an end too. And it just shows that, yes, being one of the most talented drivers ever is definitely a positive. But if you don't have the right equipment under you, you are not going anywhere. And we saw that with Kyle Busch. I mean, he would have been 17th in the regular season, like full season standings. In fact, he would have made, if this was just the top 16, I remember writing about this for gridnetworktv.com. If this was just the top 16, no winning in with like Harrison Burton and stuff like that. And if even then, he would have made it over Joey Logano in the playoffs because Kyle Busch would have been, I believe, the 15 or 16 seed, and Logano would have been one spot out. And that's just crazy to me. It really is. But no, besides that, I think Kyle Busch had a lot of false hope last year. I think Richard Childress Racing was great. I think it was just him trying to prove a point that he can win without Joe Gibbs Racing or Hendrick Motorsports way back when. And he did just that. And then he fell off the face of the earth with that equipment. I mean, shout out Austin Dillon in a full season would have been like 27th. But this year, Austin Dillon was 32nd in points. 32nd in points. I know there was a penalty. But if you have that much of a gap between two drivers, even equipment, I still think Austin Dillon is not a bad driver. I really do not. But 32nd in Richard Childress Racing equipment is laughable. It really is. And I feel terrible for them because they really are in a historic organization. But if you have a car that poor, something has to change. And I think Kyle Busch, if he knew ahead of time, I know it's a lot of financial. This is a business. I think if he had sponsorship, he would have really never left Joe Gibbs Racing, or maybe Denny Hamlin would have gotten him to 2311. I don't think he would have gone really to Richard Childress Racing if he had the funding that would have helped him stay with Toyota. But now, I mean, we all joked, like, is he going to try to get out of his contract? I don't know what he's going to do, but something's got to change. But then hopefully he wins the Daytona 500 so we can stop talking about this winless streak and that 21 years of trying, or however long it's been for Kyle Busch. It would be 20 or 21 now because 19-year streak comes to an end. But, man, it's just disappointing to see. I don't think it's the downfall of arguably the greatest driver in the history of the sport. I really don't. I just think it was a very bad hand dealt to him this season with that team. I mean, they had that run where, I mean, I remember with Ty Gibbs making that joke, like they got fast all of a sudden. After, Austin Dillon win, and then Kyle Busch had like 3 straight top 4s. It was looking promising. And then again, I don't think his name was mentioned once on the broadcast today. I really don't. So that goes to show what happened to Richard Childress, what happened to Kyle Busch this year. And it's just very unfortunate from a fan, even as a reporter perspective. That just, to watch the streak end like that in that abysmal type of way, like he wasn't even close to happening.
Yeah, well, Matthew, Austin Dillon was also 29th in points last year. So I think, obviously Kyle Busch won 3 races his first season with RCR, but Dillon particularly, it's been a terrible two-year run for him here. But I didn't even realize that, to be quite honest with you. Kyle Busch would have been straight up points, no winner you're in after race 26. He would have been ahead of Joey Logano in the standings with.
I believe he was like right at 16th or 15th. They can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember writing about that, sitting to myself like, wow, very
that was how Logano's season was trending before the. That's your current dynasty right now, guys. Worse than RCR after 26 races, and then they get hot at the right time. But hey, that's more power to them. That's the world that we're living in right now.
Win and you're in, as they say. How things would have been different, especially Kyle Busch got close to a win at the Southern 500. Well, hold on. Yeah, that was the last race of the playoffs this year. Traditionally, it's the first race. So
Briscoe beat him to get,
Briscoe beat him, got in. Yeah, it's something else. In the chat room, Nicholas, he did say he does watch the podcast, so he did understand it. Adam, Penske had a dominant year in motorsports. I would say especially other series, IMSA, IndyCar, they got the Indy 500. Will Power, Scott McLaughlin were championship contenders. I believe they got the Rolex 24, correct?
Yeah, Joe, I'm going to give Avery Hage a shout out here.
That's what I was thinking of.
On Blue Sky, and Grid Network's now on Blue Sky. I know Matthew, Joe, all 3 of us are over there as well. We'll see where the microblogging social space trends towards X or Threads or Blue Sky in the off season. I'm still going to try to stay relatively active on all 3. We'll see where that goes here. But Avery pointed out Penske in 2024, Rolex 24 winners, Indy 500 winners, IMSA GTP drivers champions, IMSA GTP Michelin Endurance Cup champions, IMSA GTP teams champions, WEC Hypercar drivers champions, and NASCAR Cup Series champions, all in 2024 for Team Penske. So a very impressive year across the board in the world of motorsports.
Can't wait to try to forget about St. Petersburg too for Penske with all those accomplishments. There
you go.
One of the things I have to say, hearing this accomplishment was a surprise to me. Carson Hocevar, your 2024 Cup Series Rookie of the Year, he was in the top 10 earlier in this race. Spire, they seem to be on the upswing. I can't help but know Spire, besides saying Smith crash, they seem to be getting better and better. And then today, Michael McDowell, front row, dreadful car today. I don't know what happened. They must have made a setup or something. But I got to ask you, Matthew, do you believe Hocevar's image has improved compared to where it was last year as a driver?
I think it would be hard not to. I think especially, but actually, no, I can't really say that either because I think there were a lot of issues with him this year too, running into drivers. But I think once he's maturing, obviously, and I think he well deserves to be Rookie of the Year. I think where was his lone top 5? Was it Watkins Glen?
Yes.
Thank you. I was cool for me. I was in person for that. So that will be something I'll remember is the 2024 Rookie of the Year. I was in person for his first top 5. Pretty awesome on my end, but besides that, yeah, I think his image improved. I think to show what he was able to accomplish, he started consistently running in the top 10, top 15. And that car, I wouldn't be surprised if he continues that. I know bringing a veteran over to Spire in Michael McDowell. Granted, Michael McDowell's had a long career. It might not have been the best, but he's really picked it up these past couple of years. And to see that 34 Love's machine not be out there anymore, I think that's going to really change my perspective. You know how like now with NASCAR's business model and stuff like that, we don't see the same sponsor usually week in, week out like we do with like HendrickCars.com or Shell for Logano. But Love's has always been on McDowell's car. And then FedEx, I wonder if we'll touch on that too. That's a very disappointing end. But speaking on Hocevar, though, I mean, he deserved it. I think his image probably has improved a little bit, and I'm very excited to see what he's able to do, especially now that Spire Motorsports seems to be picking up the pace, literally, and doing well. And then I know they got Justin Haley over there now with Michael McDowell. That's going to be a fun team. They are losing Zane Smith, though. Unfortunate end to his Cup season. I don't know where he's going next year. I think the charter issue is probably why he hasn't been announced anywhere either. But yeah, once again, I mean, I give props to Carson Hocevar. I think he finished 21st in points, right behind Kyle Busch. So pretty impressive on his end. You got to give props where he's due. He really was the rookie of the year without a doubt.
Yeah, I would have totally picked Josh Berry to be rookie of the year coming into the season. Obviously, what happened at Stewart Haas is, unfortunate in its own right. It's going to be sad to see that team go, at least in its current form, I guess. I guess we'll still have one Haas factory team car out there next year. But for Josh Berry, certainly not the rookie season that he would have hoped for, as well as Zane Smith. When you look past the, surprise second place finish at the Nashville Insanity quintuple overtime race, certainly not the season that he was hoping for either, or I think many people expected given how strong he was in trucks. But Hocevar, again, Matthew, I agree. I think, certainly really had nowhere to go but up in terms of his image in the minds of a lot of people, especially after what happened at Phoenix last year. So it would have been hard for his image to not improve among the fan base. But I think racing in Cup on Sundays with the best in this sport, it was always going to be a situation where, Hocevar better get his image in shape here and make sure that he's racing these Cup Series drivers with respect, which I think for the most part he did this year. Maybe had a couple of run-ins here and there, but nonetheless, still a very solid rookie season for him. And again, talent has never been the question when it comes to Carson Hocevar. It's always just been the amount of respect or lack thereof that he races with. And I think he did improve his image quite a bit this year. Probably still some steps to go in order to completely erase that mindset that a lot of fans will carry over to him from his Truck Series days. But good first step nonetheless here, and well-deserved rookie of the year for his 2024 season.
Yeah, definitely. I think I picked Zane Smith, by the way, so I was way off with my rookie of the year prediction. So once again, it is what it is, right, guys? But
such a long season. 2024, of course, is going to be remembered as Martin Truex Jr.'s final full-time season as well, too. Today, I don't know what's going on, but I'm starting to wonder about the talks of what's going on with Joe Gibbs Racing, because Martin Truex Jr., everybody was watching him. Today, Denny Hamlin, he thanked FedEx as they appear to be departing and in a long 20-plus year run as a sponsor for him. Now, of course, you had that. Christopher Bell led plenty of laps today, but we know what happened in Martinsville knocked him out. He said he felt cheated out of the championship before. Ty Gibbs is on a slump. Crashed early. I know, Matthew, you pointed out the last few races, 30th or worse, it seems. It's just nothing going right. And then with Truex Jr. going winless and just seemed to be the theme of the day. Started up front, got the pole, gets in the dirty air, just something about he cannot seem to get that car better and just came home midfield. Ben, is Joe Gibbs Racing at a point where they have to reevaluate their future? Because it seems like not trending the right way.
I don't know if they're at that point yet. I mean, obviously, it sounds like this was FedEx's last race. I don't know why Denny Hamlin would be tweeting that out if it wasn't. I was certainly expecting them to scale back their sponsorship, but just because that's how the business model has been going in this sport. But to hear that they are more than likely leaving entirely is quite surprising. And of course, as they lost Kyle Busch, one of the reasons I think they lost Kyle Busch was because they lost Mars and all their brands, M&M's being the most famous of those that were on his car for many years. So I think that's more just a reflection of the business model changing. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the only full-time 36 race sponsor we really still have left is Ally on Alex Bowman's car. And even then, Ally is a financial group. It's a bank. It's not, a hardware store like Lowe's or Home Depot, or a logistics shipping company like FedEx or UPS was in this sport with Dale Jarrett for many years. And then even with David Reagan and Carl Edwards a few years after that, the businesses that are in our sport right now, the partners that are in our sport, are changing as the sport has changed, and very few of them as well, are here for more than just a handful of races. The iconic schemes of yesteryear have kind of gone away, and everybody's in a different. I mean, I think this is why fans thought the number placement was so important, because that's really the last great identifier. Because even the champions of our sport seem to have different sponsors week in and week out now. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I know, Joe Gibbs is obviously still the top Toyota team, and they're going to have plenty of partners coming back. Toyota's going to have plenty of partners coming back that'll fill in those races. I have full confidence in that. Not to say that it isn't, alarming in the grander scheme of things if FedEx doesn't see the value anymore to the point where they're pulling out. But I wouldn't worry too much about it on a single team perspective from Joe Gibbs, or manufacturer perspective from Toyota. And I wouldn't worry too much about their driver lineup either. I think Ty Gibbs is still learning. Obviously, I'm a little surprised that he hasn't broken through and gotten a win yet, but I still think he has plenty of talent and a lot of potential. We know the talent and potential that Christopher Bell has. I think Lee Diffie even said on the broadcast today here, defending champion battling future champion, as Blaney was trying to work his way around the 20 car there. So, in the eyes of many, I think Christopher Bell is going to be a champion at some point if he can continue the stretch that he's on here. And that is, Matthew, you want to jump in with something there?
No, I just had a thought, a bubble, like something unlocked. I'll let you finish your point. It was like real time. Something just.
No, sure. I'm just trying to think about their driver lineup as well. I think Chase Briscoe again has kind of been held back a little bit, by Stuart Haas's downfall the last couple of years. And again, we'll see what he can do stepping into Martin Truex Jr.'s car next year. And then Denny Hamlin again, I think still has minimum 2 to 3 years left where he can be competitive and try to capture that elusive championship. So. Their driver lineup, I think, is pretty solid, at least for the foreseeable future. We know Toyota's always had the opposite problem. They can't hold on to prospects. They lose their prospects to Chevy or Ford, or maybe in the case of Chandler Smith, their dad's construction company or whatever, just whatever it is. They don't have the rides when they get to the Cup Series level to keep them, but they're great at finding talent through the TRD development program. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. And again, I think if any team can overcome a big sponsor like FedEx stepping out, I think you've already seen it. Denny Hamlin with Sport Clips being on his car, and Mavis picking up a bunch of races over the last couple of years. I think they'll pick up those partners and probably be okay there as well.
And yeah, for me on that point with Gibbs, I don't think they need to reevaluate their future. I think they need to reevaluate their business model, because just looking at it, the way their sponsorship goes. Oh, sorry if I'm laggy. I apologize on my end. But just they need to reevaluate their business model, I feel, the way that their sponsorship is, because just losing FedEx is terrible. But now I think this puts the blame on NASCAR too, and the cost. If FedEx, who has been with Denny Hamlin for 2 decades almost, decides that their ROI is they're not getting as much back anymore for being an iconic sponsor on him, something's wrong here. It really is. And I think Interstate Batteries is one of those that they sponsor all 4 cars. You don't really see that a lot with other teams. I think Menards, though, is on all the Penske cars, though, if I'm not mistaken. And then like McDonald, like with the bigger teams is what I'm alluding to. But no, I think it's just weird where Joe Gibbs Racing is at, because they have some of the most talented drivers in the field. Christopher Bell's arguably top 3 in the NASCAR Cup Series right now. But the reason, like when I had that moment where I interrupted Ben, and I apologize, is going into next season, it will be Denny Hamlin, Chase Briscoe, Christopher Bell, and Ty Gibbs. When is the last time Joe Gibbs Racing fielded a 4-car team without any of their guys being a Cup Series champion? That's why my mind blew for a second, because they've had Martin Truex for the however long. They've had Matt Kenseth before that, or I guess even during that too. So would it have been – it's been at least, 7-8 years probably?
It would have been from 2009 to, I guess, 2013 when Kenseth came in. Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Joey Logano. Kyle Busch didn't win a title until 2015. So, I mean, if you want to talk about not having a future champion either, I mean, my goodness, Dale Jarrett, Bobby Labonte, Tony Stewart. I mean, I don't know if that's ever happened with Gibbs. So maybe we'll be able to look back and say, one of these 3 young drivers, or maybe Denny Hamlin finally gets that elusive title. But yeah, I mean, when you think of Joe Gibbs Racing, you certainly think of having championship drivers on your roster there. So yeah, it's been a while for Gibbs for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I apologize. That's what like burst my mind for a second. It's like, oh my gosh, we're going into a Joe Gibbs Racing year, which is one of those teams that's always known to have a champion experienced driver on the team. And I mean, Denny Hamlin's the best probably to never win a championship, but still that's not on the resume. He's missing that. And I think that's what the team will be missing next year is a Cup Series champion on that team. But to go back to the Gibbs, it's just the business model too. Obviously, that's really what it is. Something. If 2311 specifically and Front Row, if this whole charter situation goes and they win this lawsuit against NASCAR, I think we're going to see a rise in sponsorship because I think the profitability from these teams, what they will be getting back, will make it a little cheaper to run. It's still a very expensive sport. Even ARCA, to put somebody in, say, a Joe Gibbs Racing ARCA car, it's probably near $1 million for a full season. And that's minimum. That's not including paying your crew and stuff like that. So just to be in the car with sponsorship is $1 million. So this sport is a very high-end sport. So I said this last time, it's a business and it's entertainment before it's a sport. I think the way we have seen the last 10 years go. And the one thing is with Joe Gibbs Racing, what we're going to see here, they're very lucky. I mean, they lost Kyle Busch because of sponsorship money, most likely, and they were bringing Ty Gibbs anyway, besides that. If they lost Bass Pro instead, like if they left with Truex and went to, say, Noah Gragson more instead of staying with Chase Briscoe, there would have been a huge financial situation at Joe Gibbs Racing. So lucky for them, they still have one of the best teams in the sport, and I think regardless of what the business model is, they're going to be competing for at least 6 wins next year. At a minimum, they'll have 6.
I find it interesting with Joe Gibbs Racing, all 4 cars made the playoffs, and it was just one of those deals. I know I predicted on the show, I don't see Martin Truex getting out of that first round. Ty Gibbs got close to a win in Atlanta. Things didn't work out. Much different story. He got at least one win. A couple times very close. I think he's going to keep getting better and better. I'll be interested to see how Chase Briscoe does with this team. Might be really good because now he's going to step up in the equipment. Christopher Bell, I just don't get it. He was so good today. In the round of 8, good when he needed to be, and it was just Martinsville, just the team, the pit crew themselves even. It just seemed like they dropped the ball big time, and the controversy, he's out. And Denny Hamlin, losing FedEx. We've seen a couple of races where it was, I believe, a tire shop that's also sponsoring Denny Hamlin as well. That bluish car. I'm curious to see. I assume they're going to be around. We know Sports Clip has been around. What other sponsors? But you bring up a fascinating fact that you don't have a current champion on that team of 4. I wonder if that could be a concern long term. If it's like, okay, if for some reason they don't get a championship next year, how much longer? Because at the end of the day, it is a business. And Denny Hamlin, well, FedEx is gone. I'm assuming he's going to be relying on multiple sponsors. If he doesn't get a championship, how much longer does Joe Gibbs decide to keep him around? It'll be very fascinating to see what happens. And, of course, any announcements from Joe Gibbs Racing on new sponsors. Of course, during the offseason, especially Grid Tonight right here, we'll be reporting on that. Because now the 2024 season has concluded for the NASCAR Cup Series, as well as all the NASCAR National Touring Series as well. Matthew, I know we'll probably talk more about NASCAR in a future roundtable, but what are some of the main storylines you're going to be following?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. And also to make a fun point about that, most companies right now, multi-million-dollar organizations, are filing and finalizing their budgets. So this is go time for these Cup Series, any sort of racing series. If you're a driver watching, from pretty much September until December, is when, pretty much late November, I should say, these teams are finalizing their budgets. So right now they're working. These marketing teams are getting marketing decks together. They're getting these drivers ready to be like, we want millions of dollars. You'd be on our car, the return on investment, so on and so forth. But they just wanted to point that out. I think that was a fun point, learning about that side of the sport. But there's so many storylines. Silly season, there's not too much left. I would love to see Zane Smith wherever he goes. We know where Corey Haim's going. I think him, Ty Gibbs, Christopher Bell, those are 3 future Cup Series champions. with Toyota. I really think that. And I think the business model too, and the silly season about pretty much where like Corey Heim was going specifically in the charter system. Riley Herbst should be in the 2311 car next year, but that's the rumor, but we don't know what's going to happen. Zane Smith, no idea what's going to happen to him either. So I think silly season is going to be the big storylines to follow. But then looking too at the standings, I mean, some of these guys, like example, like a Bubba Wallace right there, who re-signed for 2311. I know the whole charter situation going on, but he had the best season of his career. I mean, besides he has 2 wins in Cup, but he didn't get any this year or last year. But he had the most top 5s he's ever had, top 10s, lap sleds, so on and so forth. So he's a driver you can see building the momentum. Someone like Chris Buescher as well, who just missed the playoffs but still got a win. That's another storyline I think we have to look at and pick up for next year. And it's just going to be interesting to see what happens with everything going on. It really is. So storyline from the Cup Series perspective, though, too, I have a feeling something crazy is going to happen in this offseason, something that's not on paper right now. I think something that's going to happen within the next 90 days. I don't know if it's going to be a driver switching teams or whether the charter, maybe the whole Ryan Preece rumors that we've been hearing, that could be something interesting we see happen. But I think the biggest storyline heading into next season is where everyone's going to be and what's going to happen with this whole lawsuit with 2311 Front Row Motorsports and NASCAR.
Yeah, that's just it. That's got to be number one by a mile, is what happens with 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports as they continue to work through this lawsuit with NASCAR. So I'm sure that's going to be at the forefront of everybody's minds here over the next few months during the offseason. In terms of on-track product, I don't know. I think obviously, Penske is the team to beat right now when it comes to winning a championship. But, again, there's certainly going to be drivers looking for a bounce back year. Bubba Wallace, it's been a while since he's been to victory lane, like you mentioned, Matthew. Kyle Busch obviously wants to, start a brand new streak, I suppose, and get back to victory lane himself. And then, we're going to have some new drivers in new places. Always interesting to see how their first seasons work for them in their new environments. So, those will be interesting to keep an eye on as well. But I think the biggest storyline by far has to be what's going on off the track right now with the 2 teams that are suing NASCAR over the charter agreement.
A lot going on. I think I'm really curious to see about NASCAR if they're going to make any changes in response to Martinsville. I think that was a big one. As we get closer to the clash at Bowman Gray Stadium, looking forward to that. Curious if there's going to be any rumors swirling about 2026, and especially this race, I would say, Phoenix. It didn't exactly produce the greatest of racing compared to what we had a few weeks ago at Homestead. We know there's been rumors of like another 1.5 mile oval, Charlotte, Las Vegas, maybe even Darlington, which I would find super surprising if they keep the Labor Day date and then a championship race later on. I just don't see that in the cards. But it'll be interesting to see for at least 2026 if things start moving towards getting that all set up next year. Now, one of the big things, of course, NASCAR, their season's over, but we still got more racing in the grid ranking. Top 10 remain unchanged because none of them raced today. But then taking a look at the full grid ranking, and here's the one thing, and this goes back to the system and Joey Logano. Joey Logano did not make the grid ranking this year. This is only the second time, and in the second consecutive year, the Cup Series champion did not make the grid ranking. Statistically, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Ryan Blaney made the top 5. They had better seasons. Joey Logano was 9th in the grid rating for the NASCAR Cup Series, where only the top 5 drivers get it. Ben, does this say something about drivers who statistically had the better season, but because they didn't get a win in a key race like Homestead, the round of 8, or just one bad race like Martinsville, they're not the series champion?
Yeah, well, I think the grid ranking, of course, takes a whole bunch of different metrics from 7 different series and tries to put them all together on aggregate and see who the best, motorsports competitor of the year is. So I guess it shouldn't be too surprising, especially in this format, in this era, that NASCAR's champion might not be the grid ranking champion. I think Martin Truex Jr. Did that in 2017, but even would be the top, I guess, in the grid rating NASCAR rank. That might not be the championship winning driver either. That's totally understandable. But I think it just speaks to where Logano would be in a full season format, Joey. And I trust that you have the full statistics in front of you. But if you're saying Logano's ninth by our metric that we use, and again, by any other metric that I threw out there at the beginning of the show, whether it's 11th or 12th or 13th or whatever, that really, I think, is more indicative of where Joey Logano, even with winning 3 of the last 10 races and going on this run here at the end of the year, can only elevate him so much based on his performance in the first 26, aside from, of course, that win at Nashville. So, again, I think I don't have too much to say that doesn't make me sound like a broken record. I think I said it all at the start of the show. But yeah, it's just further evidence that this system, despite what Steve Phelps said at last year's State of the Sport and reiterated at this year's State of the Sport, it does not always reward the best drivers in the sport. It frequently, however, rewards the drivers that get hot at the best time in the sport. And for the last 3 years now, it's been Team Penske drivers. Again, more power to them. But our metric that we use for the grid ranking, again, just further proof that when you look at the season in its totality over the course of the full year, Joey Logano is not who comes to mind when you think of championship contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the grid ranking system does a great job of measuring all these different metrics to say who really is the best motorsports driver out there. And I think it's funny, there will be one full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver next year that is a grid ranking champion. 2022, I believe it was, Shane Van Gisbergen, but I don't know if he'll win it this next time around in 2025. But I just want to point that out. I think it's funny. But yeah, I mean, 2 consecutive years in the NASCAR grid rating specifically too, and the grid ranking overall, that the NASCAR Cup Series champion was not in the grid ranking or the grid rating in the top 5 specifically. That kind of shows, I mean, there's 7 motorsports in this that are measured all with the same metric. And yet NASCAR is the only sport that now you can say consistently or consecutively has produced their overall champion, and it has not been one of the best drivers in that sport, not even one of the best top 5 drivers in that sport. This is based on the ranking, obviously, and the metric, but that kind of shows something is a little wrong here. I mean, it is, I think, was it William Byron would have been the 2023 grid rating champion from NASCAR. And then 2024, I know we're announcing soon, but that's Kyle Larson will be the grid rating champion for NASCAR this year. And Kyle Larson was third, like Joe pointed out, was third in 2021 in his dominant year. But that's the last time we've had a NASCAR driver in the top 10, which is really insane to think about. And it just shows that maybe you can argue NASCAR is more competitive in the sense where we've had multiple years in a row where there's been at least 16 different drivers winning. You don't see that a lot in other motorsport. But still, I mean, the metric's the same, and I think it's equitable throughout all of the sports. But we're going to see, was it a MotoGP champion this year? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the first time we're going to see a champion like in that specific sport multiple times? I know we've had Max Verstappen F1, we've had SVG Supercars, Martin Truex's NASCAR. No, sorry, it was is it Mark Marquez?
Yep.
Yes,
Mark
thank
Marquez.
you. So I had to say that out loud, but MotoGP drivers, they're one of the sport with this system that there's always a guy that's consistently better than every single person and hits all the metrics right where it needs to be. But yeah, it just shows that NASCAR, something's wrong if they can't find a driver, their champion, inside a metric system, ranking the best drivers in these 7 series. Usually, I mean, there's a lot, analytics, metric, whatever you want to, it's awesome. And for the NASCAR to 2 years in a row not have someone in the top 5 in the specific sport says something is wrong.
The level of consistency and dominance has just dropped from 2021 Kyle Larson, 10 wins. And then this year, 6 wins. How many DNFs did he get? How many spin outs? I think the system also plays a factor where you're going for the win so often. At least in the NASCAR aspect, the drivers, they're more willing to risk it because, well, if I didn't get the win and I finished 13th or 14th, whatever, that consistency motivator is gone. Because unfortunately, consistency sometimes will not get you the championship. It's just getting a right place, right time win, especially in the playoffs. And overall, next week, we'll be back again following because, as Matthew said, MotoGP championships on the line. Jorge Martino or Pecco Bagnaia, one of those two will be the grid ranking world champion. You got supercars, and of course, we still have Formula One left to go. With that said, Matthew, I'll start with you for our one shining moment. I would encourage everyone in the chat room share their shining moment from the weekend. Matthew, the floor is yours.
It's tough, honestly. Obviously, there's only one sport. If you're specifically just doing what's in the grid system, it's obviously just the NASCAR Cup Series. You would say probably just Penske winning the championship, Joey Logano joining an exclusive list of drivers of, I think, what is he, the 10th driver all time? I'm just trying to pull up the list. He joins Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt Sr., Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Darrell Waltrip, Cale Yarborough, David Pearson, Lee Petty, and now Joey Logano are the only 3-time or more NASCAR Cup Series champions. So he would be my one shining moment. But other than that, I think with the race with Phoenix and how that went, that's not really a good look for NASCAR. But, I mean, the Logano championship and Ford and Team Penske, those are pretty much anything associated with Team Penske. That's the shining moment of this weekend.
Well, and I know we'll close the show with this as well. Unfortunately, we lost Bobby Allison yesterday, former NASCAR champion himself, fourth on the all-time wins list now with 85 Cup Series wins, which is how it always should have been. And I want to backtrack a little bit to just a couple of weeks ago and make that a shining moment because that is certainly deserving of that recognition. NASCAR finally crediting Bobby Allison with an official Cup Series win for that 1971 race at Bowman Gray Stadium. And thank goodness that he got to be credited with that and recognized for that, as he always should have been while he was still with us here. But I suppose it is fitting that when you think of Bobby Allison's Cup Series career, you think of perhaps his two most iconic numbers being the number 22 and the number 12. Who drives for Team Penske right now? And those two car numbers who finished 1-2 today, Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney. Fitting tribute, I suppose, to Bobby Allison on this weekend. That's a one shining moment, no doubt.
For me, the shining moment, I think it has to be Penske, 3 championships in a row. We could go about the system and all that, but for any team owner to get 3 in a row, that is something special. And then, of course, just knowing the season he had, amazing stuff from that Penske organization. Of course, as been mentioned before we close the show, yesterday we did hear the sad news about the passing of NASCAR Hall of Famer Bobby Allison. Of course, Bobby Allison, leader of the Alabama gang, was 86 years old, passed away peacefully at his home, surrounded by family, along with being in the Hall of Fame and one of the founding members of the Alabama gang. 3-time Daytona 500 winner. Multiple times he won the Southern 500 at Darlington. And of course, he was the proud father of his 2 late kids, Clifford and Davey Allison, both gone too soon. Definitely thinking of everyone in the Allison family, NASCAR community, mourning the loss of Bobby Allison. Truly one of the best all times, and he would be very much missed. I know we're going to be, of course, getting ready for the next race weekend. But before we do that, on Encore Monday, Ben and Brandon are going to be recapping Saturday and Friday's race. Friday also included the Arco West season finale, so be sure to tune in. Very excited for tomorrow night. Wednesday, Grid Tonight, Kobe Lambeth, Joshua Birch, Matt White, they're all going to be on the air. Then we'll do it all over again Saturday, Grid Life pre-race, and then the wrap-up on Sunday after all the racing has concluded. For Matthew Bro and Ben Schneider, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.